Okay. Welcome. Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining us for what proves to be another exciting webinar all about the Healing Futures program out of Philly. We have two wonderful panelists who are going to join us in conversation about the work that Healing Futures is doing really to respond to Philadelphia's youth punishment system. So let's take just about a minute as we are coming in. If you want to drop in the chat where you're watching from, just to give folks a chance to roll in, and then we will begin our conversation. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again. All right, we can go ahead and get started. My name is DeMointe Wesley. I am the Associate Director. Oh, thank you for coming from the Big Island in Hawaii. And we've got someone here from Philadelphia Center City as well. Welcome, welcome. Like I was saying, I'm DeMointe Wesley. I'm the Associate Director of the Zaire Institute for Restorative Justice, which is a program of Eastern Mennonite University's Center for Justice and Peace Building. And it has been such an honor to host these different webinar topics so far this year. And we have another exciting one for you today. We will be joined by Hanae Mason and Jasmine Diaz of Healing Futures, which is a program out of the Youth Arts and Self-Empowerment program or project in Philly. We're going to have a conversation with Hanae and Jasmine. There will also be time for questions at the end, so make sure that you are thinking of those and jotting them down in the comments as we go. And we're also going to link to the Healing Futures report, which goes into depth about all of the wonderful work that Healing Futures is doing. Okay, so without further ado, it is my pleasure to begin introducing our panelists. So first up, we have Hanae Victoria Mason, who is a community organizer, journalist, and artist who is deeply committed to advancing restorative and healing justice in Philadelphia. So she has a storied career as an organizer, but most recently she has worked as the Stoneleaf Foundation Emerging Leader Fellow, working with the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project to expand the scope of the Healing Futures Restorative Justice Diversion program in Philadelphia's youth justice system. This has included the development and promotion of the report that we're going to be talking about on the first 2 years of the program, which highlighted its impact on participants and the community. So thank you so much for being with us, Hanae.
Thank you, DeMointe.
And next up, we have Jasmine Diaz, who is a restorative justice facilitator, organizer, and student from Houston, Texas, my hometown. Jazz started out as Healing Futures' very first intern, then became a part-time fellow with the American Friends Service Committee, and now works at YASP full-time. They are also currently a Master of Social Work at Bryn Mawr College's Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research. Jazz is passionate about community building and art as self-expression. In their spare time, Jazz loves to attend concerts, travel, and spend time with loved ones. Welcome, Jazz. All right. So thank you both so much for being here as a part of this conversation. To start off, one, I want to give each of you time maybe to introduce yourself a little bit more, anything I didn't cover. And then I would really love to just get a little bit of background about what YASP is and what Healing Futures is, and really what the aim has been. So Hanae, if you want to start, anything I missed in your intro, and then from your perspective, what really is the work of YASP and of Healing Futures?
Great, thank you. So once again, I'm Hanae Victoria Mason, and so I'm West Philadelphia based, and have been for a long time, but my hometown is Montgomery, Alabama. And I like to say that's really important to the beginning of my story because, Montgomery has a very storied history of its own, both having been, formerly the capital of the Confederacy at one point, and then also having been the birthplace in a lot of ways of the Civil Rights Movement. And so, my family history and lineage is really tied up into that. And so I grew up at a really early age, knowing pretty, explicitly about this country's history, about, the work that is required for us to, have a sense of justice and rights in our lives, right? And that it takes each of us kind of finding our meaningful work, to stand up and be able to kind of continue this fight for justice, because it doesn't really end. I think that's something that sometimes we take for granted, that we've accomplished something and that it will maintain. I think we've definitely seen recently that that's not the case. We have to continue to fight for those rights and make sure that they're maintained. And so, from a really early age, history was important to me. Writing was important, storytelling. And my background was in journalism and communications, because I thought that it's really important that we know how to craft these narratives. We know how to do the research and things like that. But that led me to taking a lot of different side quests and paths, definitely through working at nonprofits and trying to figure out what it's like to have kind of mission-based work. But restorative justice found me a couple years ago because, I was doing the work of restorative justice without having the language and framework, and a lot of the community organizing that I had been doing. And so when I finally found organizations that were explicitly calling themselves restorative justice organizations, I wanted to learn more. I want to know what that means. And so YASP Healing Futures was one of those organizations, and the opportunity to be a Stoneleigh Fellow here opened in 2023. And so I came on to be able to help tell the story of Healing Futures, what it means to be Philadelphia's first youth restorative justice diversion program, what it means to show the effectiveness of restorative justice, as we know, like as a practice that's been happening for centuries, but in this more, modern context is still relatively, new. And so how do we start having this documentation, this archiving of what this work looks like, what it means to be doing, restorative justice in a dedicated way, especially in a criminal justice system framework, and how we can continue to build up on that story. So I'll pause for there. I'll let Jazz jump in, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jazz. And yeah, not much more to add. In undergrad, I was majoring in biology, actually. And my senior year, I had to take a class that wasn't like STEM and, an elective. And I was like, what do I do? And I ended up in this random class, and it had a praxis. So I had to intern at a community org in Philly while going to class at the same time. And so it just so happened that YASP was that org, and I was just like, wow, this is beautiful, all the amazing work, and just the different ways in which you can actually help people in the community without being tied to most or any other systems was really what really called me to YASP, because YASP is an abolitionist org and a youth org. So yeah, and I've been in Philly for 7 years now. I love it here. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you both so much for giving that background, and I think that really important, that framing. Jazz, you used a word that I want to make sure that our audience is sort of familiar with. You said YASP Healing Futures is a abolitionist organization. Could you sort of speak to what that means in terms of Healing Futures?
Yes. So the Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project, our overall organizational mission is to end youth direct file, because in PA or in Philly, both, a young person as young as 10 years old can actually be trialed and charged as an adult. And we're against that. So that's kind of where our abolitionist framework comes into, because we really, just thinks of ways in which we can combat against that. And Healing Futures is one of the programs in which, yes, we can do that by. And with Healing Futures, we basically keep kids from having to have any more contact with the system past their arrest. And once they complete the program, it's like the arrest never happened and the charges get dropped, essentially. So that's kind of where we align with that word. I don't know if you want to think, Hannah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, started about 2 decades ago, like you said, with this mission of ending direct file, and has since, added many programs, including Healing Futures, which started in 2021, to have this mission of not just, that young people shouldn't be charged as adults, but that there should be no young people ever arrested or incarcerated, right? And so, having that abolitionist mission is that, we understand that it's going to take steps before we get there. And we really see this work of diversion as one of those important first steps of, interrupting where young people are being snatched from our community and taken away from us. Philadelphia in particular is one of the cities that arrests and incarcerates young people at one of the highest rates in the country. And so it's very particular that we take on these steps of trying these different type of diversion and alternatives to incarceration here, as we are kind of like ground zero for where this problem is happening.
Yeah, thank you again for that sort of framework, that understanding of why this work is able to live and thrive in Philly in particular. And a little bit later, I really want to pick y'all's brains on how you think that this work can sort of be replicated elsewhere. But first, I'm really interested, I think our audience, if they are a Zare Institute audience, they're probably familiar with what restorative justice and what diversion is. But for those who are not, could you sort of maybe explain, what are we talking about when we say diversion? What does that look like in the Healing Futures model? What's the sort of life of a case or of your time with a young person?
Yeah, I can give a little overview, and then Jazz, you can go into maybe specifics of facilitating. And so, like I said, Healing Futures started in 2021. We were in part of a cohort that was started by Impact Justice, which is this organization at the time. They had a restorative justice project, which went around the country and helped to seed a lot of these youth restorative justice diversion programs. And so they trained the facilitators. They kind of helped to develop the relationships with the respective district attorneys' offices, and really gave the structure for how a restorative justice diversion program or process looks like. And so with that training, we were able to establish and develop that relationship with our district attorney's office, where they refer us the case of a young person pre-charge or pre-petition, and we're able to take their case, spend time with them, really understanding what it looks like to understand the harm that was caused by them, getting them to understand their values, their integrity, and how they actually want to show up in community instead. They get prepared to come face to face with the person that they've harmed, who has also been prepped for this conversation. And then there's this community restorative community conference, a circle process, where everybody comes together and is able to hear each other out and establish some kind of reparative plan, restorative plan for the young person to kind of fulfill what it looks like to be in right relationship or right action, you know, with the person that they've harmed and with their community. And so, you know, we get these cases referred, but each process might look a little bit different, you know, depending on the need of the young person, the person harmed, and kind of the fuller story of their community and home life. But Jazz, do you want to go into a little bit more details about what facilitating these cases looks like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like Hannah was saying, we get our cases directly from the district attorney's office, and usually most of the time, like in the time when we get them, it's like before they even set foot like in a courthouse or anything. Like they don't have to go through any of that. And once their case is officially in like Healing Futures hands, like we no longer, like the district attorney's office no longer has to be in any like communication with the families or in any way. Like the young people and their caregivers receive like all updates and everything. Their communication is through Healing Futures. And we established that confidentiality between us too. Us as facilitators, yes, we do meet with the DA like bi-weekly maybe to give updates on the young person's case, but like we get to decide how much we feel is right to like actually tell the DA, which most of the time is just like, this person is in this part of our program, and we expect, like we mostly give like timeline, like checkpoints, just because, yeah, we're like, it's in our hands now. The DA doesn't really need to know everything past this point. So establishing that is like really important, because usually young people and their families, when they come in, they're like, oh, I don't know, they tend to have like, they don't really know about restorative justice or what we're trying to do here. Like, what exactly does that mean? All they really know is like, the DA told me you guys were going to reach out to me. So we have like an enrollment meeting where we meet with like their caregivers and the young person and just kind of break down like the whole thing, and like what we're trying to do and our values and stuff. And then the young person at the end of the meeting gets to decide if they do want to partake in this process or not. Because one of the main like values of RJ, as most of you know, is that things are like invitations, like they're not really forced, which us in partnership with the DA does kind of, there's some tension there, because at the end of the day, if they're like, no, we don't want to do this, they'll just get sent to like a different diversion program. But like that option is still there, because we do acknowledge that asking a young person like 13, 14 years old to sit down and actually think deeply about the action that they did, and then sit with the person that they harmed in front of not only that person, but their own caregivers and that person like supporters too, is a big ask. And it's really hard like to do. I can't imagine me 14 being asked to do that. So just letting them know that, there are other options if they don't decide to do this, but also like the benefits of this are like really rewarding, and it is hard work, but we get to build really great relationships with them and get to actually see them holistically as to just like this one mistake that they did in the past, and also just like hear their side of the story too. Because the DA, when they send the case, they send us like the affidavit and like some information there, and we're just letting you know what you could be charged with, but that's really all this is for. We're more interested in like what happened to you and like what your side of the story is. So yeah, we take a much more like relationship and like trust focused approach, and we do a lot of art with our young people and try to get them to see different sides of Philly, and also connect them with people in their community, like organizations in their communities that are nearby. That way they know other places to go, or like other adults and community members that they could like reach out to if needed. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate, this is a time-intensive process. So the young people are coming once a week. Processes average about 12 weeks, right? And sometimes a little bit longer. And so they really have to be willing to continue to show up and do the work. Sessions are asking them to think about their values, to think about, who in their community they can trust and why. Thinking about, how, just being accountable in general and how to actually apologize. And so, as Jess said, that's a really hard thing to do as a young person. That's hard for a lot of adults to do, right? And so we're really, we're still there's this idea that RJ might be letting them off easy, but we really want to emphasize that there's nothing easy about this kind of work.
Yeah, definitely. The hard work of being accountable and being held in accountability, like you said, very difficult for adults, maybe even more difficult for young people. I was going to wait to take questions from the audience, but I think it's actually appropriate to ask this question now. There's a question that says, do you take referrals from defense, public defenders especially also? And I might add, is there space for like community referrals? So perhaps referrals not even coming from the criminal legal system, but from community. Have you all had any experience with those two?
I mean, as of now, we just don't have the capacity or infrastructure to take cases outside of our relationship with the DAO, but that is definitely something that we are working towards, particularly the community referrals. I know that there's a huge need for them, and we are, luckily connected to a lot of practitioners here in Philly who have the space and capacity to. So if somebody does happen to say, we would love somebody to take on this case, we have people that we can say, like, actually they have, the availability to do this process separately. But just kind of the agreement, the MOU that we have right now, we have to take them from the district attorney's office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's actually great context for folks who are like outside of Philly. I've had a little bit of the pleasure of being in Philly a little bit and getting to know some of the RJ practitioners there. Philly has a really strong restorative justice community. And so, yeah, thinking about like where there is not capacity for one program or one practitioner, there is existing capacity elsewhere. So that's really cool. Anything that either of you would say about that, maybe sort of RJ in Philly more broadly and how Healing Futures fits into that sort of that landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think you already kind of said a lot that, Philly is a place where a lot of folks are taking up the work of RJ in really meaningful ways. A lot of people are doing it in religious spaces and community spaces. There are more and more programs like ours that are starting to be developed. And I think the approach that Healing Futures has always taken is that, one, the more the merrier. We believe that RJ should be everywhere. And so we're so excited that, more people are, not just taking up the language of RJ, because there are a lot of people who say they do restorative justice work and don't necessarily know what that means to do it in practice. But there are a lot more people who are taking very seriously what it means to uphold these principles. And, we do training, and we've been doing a lot of training with different community organizations to help them, build up their skill set and their capacity to start taking on some of these cases as well. And so, we love being part of the community, whether that's like, there's a lot of folks also in academia who are starting to do this work as well. And so I think it's creating a more connected, interdependent ecosystem is really important.
Definitely. Okay, thank you both for tackling that question. Something else, and I sort of referenced this earlier that I'm interested in, is sort of what do you think are the lessons, the wisdom of Healing Futures, especially in these early years of the Healing Futures project? What do you think it holds for other programs dedicated to youth diversion and youth justice more broadly. What do you think sort of Healing Futures has to say about the sort of future of youth justice, both in Philly and perhaps across the country?
Do you want to start with this one, Jazz?
Sure. Yeah, I think so I have been at Healing Futures for 3 years now, almost 3 years. And I joined as an intern, like I think it was like their second year that they were up and running, or like their first year and stuff. But yeah, so I've actually seen Healing Futures go through a lot of changes in terms of like just the way we do like processes. And I think the biggest lesson in that is just to like be open and be creative all the time. I think is really, really important, especially with young people. And in particular, like whatever community and like population you're working with, like the RJ is not like a one size fits all model. Like I think the really cool thing about RJ is that you can take like its values and its principles and just kind of figure out how they apply to you and the people that you want to help. And that's been a big lesson for us, as well as just like reiterating what Hannah has said about time, and that like these things take time. And sometimes in partnership with like the DA, they're like, we got this other case, or like it's funny, the DA, they either send us a lot of cases at once, like we're like, okay, we have capacity now, and they'll send like 3 at once. We're a really small team, y'all. There's like 4 of us in our team. So whenever that happens, we're like, okay, obviously we have to like work through these now. So we're like, hold off on sending us cases, but each case, like each young person has different needs. It's a different like problem that happened, a different conflict. And sometimes they're group cases. There's been sometimes where we've had like 3 young people be in one, or like 2 in one. So that's 3 responsible youth that we're meeting with, and that's like one case. So it ends up being a lot because we're also meeting with like the person harmed or like their family members and stuff. And that takes time. And we're only open like 4 days a week too, and there's only 4 of us. Like, and with the school year, like they're young people, they still have to go to school and like come to us like after school. So just learning to take your time and also like set that boundary with whatever system you're working with, if you are doing RJ in that, because with the DA we've had to like set that boundary, like, no, we are at capacity right now, like hold off on this, or like, you know, sometimes just establishing that we are the ones that are doing the work and are actively meeting with the people and stuff. So don't rush us, don't pressure us, just like straight up. And that also was a lesson we had to learn, just that it's okay to like ask for those things, because I know sometimes we're like, oh, we don't want any like pushback, or maybe they'll send us less cases in the future or whatever. And it's like, no, at the end of the day, we're trying to advocate for our young people and like what they need. And if what they need is time, then we should do that. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that. Hannah?
Thank you, Jazz. Yeah, I think the time piece is really, really important. It's an investment of time. And I think often we think we have more control of time than we do. Even, you know, the best laid plans are often delayed or detoured, or something happens, right? And so, you know, really understanding that our work is very emergent. It's very much, you know, it requires us to be very adaptive to things that are coming up at any given time. And so having that level of, you know, adaptiveness, flexibility, but also trust in the process is really, really important. You know, we're working with young people, and so there's so much that's changing and unpredictable about their lives. There's so much that we realize that they also just don't have control of as well.
Mhm.
And they're really the biggest mirror to us about like how well we're doing in our world or in our relationships as well. And so, you know, some of my biggest lessons is just like being in front of a young person who is really showing me about myself and how I need to be showing up differently as,
Mhm.
you know, the adult in the situation. And so, you know, I appreciate, you know, them for really that's the purpose of youth, is to shake us up, for us to really pay attention to, you know, how they're developing. They're showing us what we need to be doing and how we need to be adapting, for them, for the benefit of them, but also, you know, the benefit of ourselves and our future, right? And so I will say those are some of the biggest lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to like double tap that point of like some of the greatest wisdom in working with youth comes from youth.
Mhm.
I tell my niece all the time that she's 13 or going to be 13, that what she has right now is a wisdom that like I as an adult have lost, that
Mhm.
is particular and special to being
Yeah.
a young person. And so how do you like lean into that wisdom, and how do you offer it to those of us who can no longer access it? I just think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful point.
Okay.
A quick question from the chat. Do you all have volunteers? This person, if you can see the chat, I work with survivors interested in RJ in Philly. And if Healing Futures doesn't take volunteers, are you familiar with any other programs in Philly that are maybe have a more volunteer model?
Volunteers is I guess I would have to ask some follow-up questions. We don't necessarily take volunteers in terms of facilitating the cases, but there are a lot of different ways that community members can be part of processes, whether that's like people who are available to come to a particular RCC. Sometimes we have community members be part of those circles. If your organization has opportunities for young people to potentially, you know, volunteer, we have our restorative plans with a lot of community organizations. That has looked like sometimes that's a mentorship, sometimes that's with them helping with community cleanups or different things. I think it's really important for young people to hear the perspective of survivors. And so we are also, you know, looking for different ways for those dialogues to develop. So I would say, you know, please, you know, shoot me. I can share my contact information later. You can certainly send me an email and we can see if there's something that we can figure out.
Wonderful. Another question from a viewer in Florida. We have Teen Court, which has an RJ background. In Teen Court, teenagers are jurors who question the person, the teenager who committed the harm, similar to a circle process. The teen recognizes the harm and is assigned sanctions by the teen jurors. Community service is mandatory. To y'all's knowledge, is there a teen court in Philadelphia? Have y'all ever interacted? If so, yeah.
There is a similar kind of teen court process here in Philly and more broadly in Pennsylvania. Um, and yeah, I think that is a necessary kind of process in which you get to hear from your peers in a certain way and have that kind of direct kind of dialogue or conversation with them, right? But I would say, you know, it doesn't offer the kind of like intensive relationship building and trust building that our RJ process has. And so I think it just is, you know, different goals and different outcomes that it can produce.
Thank you for that. A question that I have also, you've sort of spoken a bit about y'all's relationship with the DAO. I'm curious, both with that relationship, what has like forging that relationship looked like? What has building trust in that relationship looked like? But are there also other relationships and partnerships that have been really critical to the impact of Healing Futures? And if you have sort of any advice or wisdom for those who are looking to forge similar relationships in the work that they're doing in their contexts.
Do you want to start with that one, Jazz?
Yeah. In terms of the DA, I actually don't really know much about the specifics about how the relationship was established, but part of it is that we do, like I said, meet with them bi-weekly, go through case updates, and we also have to send them like an email with written updates too. And there's a specific group of people that we meet with from district attorney's office. They're actually pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. So we meet with the director of like juvenile diversion, yes. And then we have the restorative facilitator from the DA who's there, and then I believe she's like a social worker or some sorts, like with resources that just has like knows every single thing that's happening in Philly in terms of like resource that we might need. And then we meet with the person who also directly sends like the case to us. So that's like a team, and then all of us at Healing Futures meet with them too, and it's only for about an hour. And yeah, I mean, they tend to pretty much like I said, they're pretty cool. They tend to trust us and like our process and what it is that we're doing. Like, I think that's really important, and I know that it's hard to like, it's really rare to get that with like indirect partnership with the DA like that. So I will say like our ex manager of Healing Futures, who's no longer with like our manager, Gani Songster, he used to have a really good relationship with a few people that are part of the DA team. So I think that really helped with like, okay, now Gani like brought this team and is doing RJ and like Diversion, and just having that connection already was like good. But yeah, they tell us like, we trust that you're doing what you need to do, and will let us know when you need help. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything, Hannah.
Yeah, we have a what is known as one of the most progressive DAs in the country, Larry Krasner. And one of Krasner's early promises was that he would bring, not only like diversion programs, but restorative justice specifically to Philadelphia. And so, part of Healing Futures was him making good on that word. And that relationship was really facilitated by that impact justice team that I said earlier, that was kind of helping to establish these different restorative justice diversion programs around the country. And so they really helped to create the communication and the relationship with the DAO for us to be able to do this work. But even with that said, with Krasner having, this kind of ideal, and us having this like very specific like task force that we work with in the DAO's office, the DAO as an entity is not necessarily a fan of restorative justice, or, they're not quite believers. And so part of the work that we've been trying to do is to show them, the effectiveness of it, how it works, so that they have a little bit more understanding and familiarity. But we still have our work cut out, because I think a lot of people in their minds are still just not ready to kind of give up on the framework that they are so familiar with. Like, this is how we do it. This is how it's been done for so long. This is what we think we have to do to punish people, to make sure people know the harm, to discourage other people from causing harm. And so, yeah, a lot of our work has been having, conversations with folks over and over again to say like, no, there actually are other ways to do this. And here is one that we know works, if you will give us the opportunity to do a little bit more of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Jazz, did you have something you want to add?
No, I just wanted to add, like Hannah mentioned before, we do have a MOU. So the MOU is also very specific into which like types of cases we're allowed to take, and like yeah, what in what instances are young people actually eligible for this kind of diversion, and that's something that we're like actively just being like we need more cases, because right now with our current MOU, like we can't take anything that has to do with a gun, even if the young person wasn't necessarily holding the gun. Like let's just say like the gun was in the car. That case is still not eligible for diversion. Same thing with like drugs, and we just got our first like two ever like intimate partner violence cases. But like I said, it's our first two, and it's not written in our MOU yet that that's like what we're gonna do. So yeah, and that's also just like another barrier there. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important offering this context that, like, yes, you have Larry Krasner, you have a champion for RJ work, but still there is some pushback, and not just in Philly, but sort of countrywide at this point. So you mentioned Impact Justice and the Restorative Justice Project. That Restorative Justice Project moved to Equal Justice USA, which no longer exists, largely because of cuts in funding to justice reform, restorative justice work. So we are in a time, I think it's important to note, where restorative justice is really under attack by name. So thinking about the ways, again, to continue to forge these relationships, sort of like do this work, push forward this work, even in the face of that. It's really important. Something I'm curious about, this is sort of an impromptu question, but as you have sort of faced some pushback from other parts of the district attorney's office, where have you seen support outside of the district attorney's office? Has there been community support, support from past participants, and what does that sort of looked like in helping sort of craft the narrative around the work that Healing Futures is doing?
Yeah, so in September of this year, I released the report Healing Futures, a Restorative Justice Response to Philadelphia's Youth Punishment System, which was kind of a culmination of 2 years of me doing observational work, research, praxis, and actually like facilitating my own cases and like being part of the Healing Futures team, right? And so as part of that, I got to talk to all of the participants of the first 2 years of Healing Futures. And those, I would say, are probably our biggest champions because they've been through the process. They understand what it looks like very intimately, and they came out on the other side better for it. And so, some of the things that we heard, or some of the things that we were able to kind of like finally have some like evidence around, is that like 100% of people who went through Healing Futures, regardless of a young person, the person harmed, their family and community members, every single person said that they had a positive experience with the restorative justice diversion process, and that majority of them said that they would do another RJ process and also would recommend RJ for somebody who was in a similar situation or case as them. And so you can't get much better than the source, right? And so a lot of them have been luckily willing to share their stories and experiences on panels, with newspapers. And so we're continuing to be able to collect those kind of first person narratives around that. But also, like you said, we have a burgeoning RJ community here in Philadelphia. And so a lot of those folks are also, able to see not just the work of, Healing Futures, but their own processes. And so being able to now have some kind of formation where we come together and we share. We have like a wisdom circle group that we can share, our experiences about, what went well in cases, what kind of, trends or different things that are emerging that they're seeing. So that's also been really helpful to be part of like a community of other practitioners. But yeah, I mean, anybody who hears about the work and actually understands what the process looks like is like, that's amazing. Why aren't we doing more of it? What does it look like to do more? And, that's what we want to hear. And, some of the things that you uplifted about, funding in particular is important to make sure that we have sustainability so that, organizations can continue to do this work. But also, making sure that people understand what it looks like and can advocate so that these kind of programs aren't cut prematurely because people don't really understand what it looks like. Yeah, that's really important.
Beautiful. Yeah, I just linked that report in the chat. And I'll have a few more questions about the report in a moment. But something I'm really thinking about, again, along this line of getting narrative from participants, I'm curious, and maybe Jazz, I'll go to you first, honoring confidentiality. Are there any stories that you can sort of share that speak to the unique successes of Healing Futures from the perspective of a facilitator? And what I'll add to that also is, you mentioned, really getting creative. Can you think of any sort of like creative outcomes that you've had in interactions with youth that really stand out to you?
Yeah, for sure. The first one that came to mind was one that Hanae and I both co-facilitated along with another facilitator, and it had to do with these two young women who got in a fight at school, and that was kind of like what we knew. And then meeting with like the both of them, we realized that it was a lot deeper than that, and actually a lot more serious than just like a school fight. The responsible youth, the young girl that was actually directly referred to us, her little brother was murdered, and then the person harmed, like the girl that she fought, was basically saying some things about him online after that, and she found out, and she was like in her moment of grief, and like they got in this huge fight, and like at the beginning, I mean, it was kind of like, why am I here? Like, I fought her, but like, I feel like she needed to get fought. Like, it was kind of what she was saying. And she came in here really like she knew what she did and she knew why. Like, she definitely did not have a problem like reflecting too much on that. And then like, so in meeting with her, it was a bit hard to actually be like, okay, well, now here's our apology letter writing workshop, and you have to write an apology letter and like apologize to the girl like in a few weeks. And she was like, why would I do that? I deserve an apology too. And so that's when we were like, that was actually one of I think like the second time where we were actually thinking about the person harmed also potentially writing an apology letter to the responsible youth. And we were like, you know what, like that's a good, like that, if that's a need that this girl like needed, that she named, like we were gonna figure out how can we make that happen, And so while we were meeting with her, we were also meeting with the person harmed the whole time, and it was just, our creativity came in because this case is also like our longest case ever. The Healing Futures curriculum in itself, like the base of it is a minimum of like 8 weeks. So if you meet with a young person, like, am I frozen?
We can still hear you, but your video is frozen.
Oh my gosh, ew. Okay. Oh my God. Well, if you meet with the young person, right, more than 8 weeks, like you have to start thinking about, okay, well, what are we doing like for these other 8 weeks? So with these particular two young women, we got into writing a lot, and not in terms of just like the apology letter, but we did a lot of poetry workshops. So we did a couple of haiku sections and like blackout poetry, and thinking about like how not daunting writing has to be. And that was really helpful for them because they both actually did really like that. Um, and we started doing more sessions like outside and just like taking our time and letting them know, you know what, we're not going to have this circle until you both are ready, even if one person like a lot. And then the person harmed like eventually, finally, after like months of meeting with her, told us like, actually, I don't think I told you guys the full story. And I think I like I definitely have some responsibility to take as well, and I want to apologize. And we were like, oh yay. So we just like focused more on meeting with them and just like building that trust and letting them know that like, yes, what happened was scary and horrible, and you guys like are in conflict with each other and like blah blah blah, but it was also like them knowing. So Healing Futures is great because the responsible youth and the person harmed, like they know that they're both meeting with us in the same space, doing the same things. And so once they trust us, they're kind of like, okay, so if she's also coming in here and meeting with you guys in the same way, I think I trust that the circle will be fine. And that's such a huge breakthrough, and that's really important. And yeah, I know I've been yapping for a little bit, but that really was like the longest case. And we also spent some time just like doing like reintroduce yourself activity was also a cute one that we came up with, because both girls named that they actually did not know each other really before this incident, and they both named that it sucked now that this is how they know each other now, like we fought each other at school because of this. So we were like, hey, maybe in the circle, like the circle's a great opportunity in your letter as well to like reintroduce yourself in the way that you actually want this young person to like see you and know you. And so we came up with this cute little activity, it gave like improv, like you come inside and like, hey, I am like la la. And so they both did that with us separately and then kind of included that in their letter. So when the circle actually happened, they actually did that introduction, and that was cute. So yeah, and then the after the circle, their restorative plan. So what is it that they're actually doing to like, make it right or whatever is kind of like the basis of it. Theirs was also really unique in the way that it was the second time as well that we had both of them do it together. And they actually both did it at Healing Futures. So we continued seeing them for the next few months. And it was beautiful because it was like our first ever, like, we created like a cohort of other alumni, of other young people that graduated our program. So they got to meet other people who also went through a program and then like make some cool art together on like what RJ means to them, what this process meant to them. And then they ultimately had it like displayed at a college and they got paid. Anyway, but definitely like nowhere in the Healing Futures curriculum does it say to do any of this. So we definitely had to like put our heads together and look at these two young girls and be like, what are the things that they've named that they need and would like to see, and how can we give that? And they both really love the Healing Futures space. So like starting from there was also like really important. But yeah, so we have a lot of love for them. They have continued to like meet with us and do webinars too, and like be on panels and stuff. Like they are really active now in our YASP community as well. So yay, a great success story there.
Yeah. Can I just want to say, like, as a RJ nerd, that case that you just like sort of spelled out, I think just speaks so wonderfully to all of the things that we sort of like say about restorative justice in the abstract. It like makes it so concrete. So that notion that like harm often occurs from a place of like broken or non-existent relationship. And so
Mhm.
giving those two young ladies the opportunity to form relationship in that like reintroducing yourself activity is so cool. The idea of like really attending to needs as they come up and sort of like scaffolding. We're not just going to
Mhm.
say we need to write this thing, but clearly like we need to help you get more comfortable with writing. And so we're going to take time to do that. That's incredible. And the last thing I will say is, you know, oftentimes when we measure like the success of restorative justice, oftentimes we're looking at things like recidivism rates,
Mhm.
which I think doesn't really speak to the actual power, the impact that restorative justice purports to have. But that understanding that after this, these two young women have become active participants and actually contributing to the healing futures and more broadly the Philly community through this process. I just think it's so cool. I think it's so cool. So thank you for sharing that story. Hannah, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna continue to brag on those girls because you know, those are some of, like I said, so close to all of our hearts. You know, one of them went on to work with another restorative justice organization in the city, Collective Climb, and you know, is being trained to be a youth facilitator as well. And then Jazz kind of downplayed this art exhibit, which Jazz helped to plan a whole kind of cohort of like they said, of alumni to learn about the principles of RJ, to create art about their experience of going through Healing Futures. And it was part of a restorative justice symposium at Haverford College where these young people got to exhibit their work. So like that's a really big deal. Some of them came in saying, "I'm not an artist. I don't want to do any of this," and they were part of their own group show. So yeah, I so proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And like I said, so many of those stories and just the experience of the Healing Futures model is captured so beautifully in the report that you created, Hannah. So again, it's linked there. It is beautifully written, beautifully illustrated. I really think it does help bring to life the work. Before we go, I'd like to ask each of you or whoever wants to take it, is there anywhere, again, we hope you read the entire report, but is there any part of the report that you would really point people's attention to as sort of like, yeah, spend some time there? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understandably, it's a very comprehensive document. One of the reasons being, you know, Healing Futures is not only, you know, Philadelphia's first youth restorative justice diversion program, but there isn't a lot of, you know, RJ research and evidence-based documentation of these programs. And so I thought it was really important to take the time to really spell out, you know, the history, what it means to do this work. There's a restorative justice primer in there, which I think is really helpful for folks who might not know just about some of the terminology, kind of the development of where restorative justice diversion comes from. So, you know, I tried to put in a couple of those, you know, executive summary. So, like, I think there's a lot of places where if you want a quick snapshot, you can find those. And if you want to go a little bit more in depth, there's also places that you can do that as well. I would also really recommend that folks who are interested in learning more about RJ in general, there's a really great references section and also like additional readings. And so that can give you a really great starting point of, what are foundational books, what are some really interesting articles. And I'm going to plug my own playlist. I have a playlist there about songs that are about, repair, redemption and things like that. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Jess, do you have any parts of the report you want to uplift?
No, all that is great. There's also, yeah, just the section on like the direct quotes from young people when they were interviewed. Yeah, definitely spend some time there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I sometimes teach courses on restorative justice, and as I was going through the report, I was thinking about how the report is sort of a curriculum in and of itself with just the resources that it offers. So even if you know about restorative justice, but you are like teaching about restorative justice, I think the report can also be really useful as a tool in that way to help introduce other people, introduce students. So we're just about at time. Hanae and Jasmine, I want to give y'all one last word. Anything that you want to say in terms of how people can support the work ongoing at YASP and at Healing Futures, how people can connect to you, anything you want to say there?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, it is the time of the year that people are doing their, end of year giving. We just had Giving Tuesday yesterday, but, there's still plenty of time if anybody would like to make a donation to YASP, particularly, around the work from Healing Futures. But once again, YASP is doing so much amazing work for young people, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and nationally, trying to really, set the bar for, what we will allow to happen to our young people. And so that is one way. You can check out our website, our Instagram. If you are in the Philadelphia area, we are having an event on December 12th. At 7 p.m. at Vox Populi, which is going to be an end of year celebration of all the wonderful work that YASP has done. And we would love all of our supporters, community members, and folks to be there. Definitely check out the report. And yeah, you can, once again, if you would like to get in touch with me or Jazz, we can, what's the best way to share our contact information?
I can drop your emails in the chat if that's okay.
That's okay with me.
Cool. Yeah, and then I just put our Instagram on the chat too. We've recently started to be more active on it, so please check us out.
And there's a request, if you can, to drop the information for the event in the chat, if you can type that quickly. And I'll just get Jazz's email. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hannah and Jasmine, and thank you all for joining. If you're watching live or you're watching the recording, again, please check out the report. Something else I want to share, we have our last webinar of the year next Wednesday, on December 10th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And that is going to be with Dr. Camille O'Quinn, who is faculty at Governor State University. And she's going to be sharing about her work around linguistic justice, literacy liberation, and the work of repair, how she's using restorative justice practices to really do work around literacy justice for Black young people. Something else I will share is the manifesto from the European Forum for Restorative Justice, which the Zaire Institute is a signatory of. Please go there and read the manifesto about restorative justice and human rights. And if you feel so inclined, feel free to sign. New signatories will be announced on December 10th, which is UN Human Rights Day. And last but not least, feel free to connect with us at the Zaire Institute by visiting our website. Go through our YouTube and watch all of the treasure trove of webinars that we have there. Yeah, thank you so much again for joining us. And please feel free to reach out. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks,